Ons is nou geskakel op GROOTplaas. Ons gas saam met ons vanoggend Dr. Tarryn Dent, die besigheidseenheiddirekteur van Geselskapsdiere by Zoetis. Dr. Dent, good morning and welcome to GROOTplaas.
Good morning, DP. Lovely to be on. Thank you so much for having me.
So we're talking parasites this morning, and they're very often associated with our pets, but how big a problem are they for animals in general?
Yeah, I know it may not seem like a very fun subject to be talking on a Thursday morning, but it really is an important thing, I feel. So what we find is that parasites are a lot more common than what pet owners think. You may commonly think it's just a nuisance or it's causing any kind of skin conditions or that type of small things, but they could really be a real risk in your pets and can cause some big issues in terms of their well-being. So we just want to create a lot of awareness around that because it is Parasite Awareness Day was on the 20th of March. So it's a really important day that we can actually just create some awareness. So I think the important part here, just to remember, is that many parasites go undetected, and you just don't need to wait until the pet is showing any clinical signs to react. You can be a lot more proactive.
So you've mentioned that a lot of these parasites obviously go unnoticed, even when our pets seem quite healthy. Why is that?
Yeah, I think in that point, people don't necessarily, they can be part or can infect your pets in a way that they have a mild infestation, so you may not notice any clinical signs, or maybe the specific thing that's infecting your pet is maybe not creating any disease or carrying a disease at the time. So that could cause it to not be clinically visible. So you'll not be able to see that your pet is ill. You won't be necessarily seeing any clinical signs, but as manifestation becomes a lot heavier, that's where, or certain parasites do affect your animal, that's where you could start to see clinical signs. So it's not always the case. They basically do go undetected, and there's some serious clinical signs that can occur with certain parasites, the common ones that we see, which in South Africa, the most common parasites we generally see, I would say, ticks, fleas, and intestinal worms. So it's not just looking at things that can affect your pet externally, so on their body, but also internal parasites as well. So worms would be a very important thing as well. So you're looking not only on the outside, but also on the inside, and when you look at parasite prevention as well.
Dr. Dent, let's elaborate on that a little bit. Like you said, most parasites are fairly common, and they affect a lot of South African animals. But how do they impact overall animal health and then or productivity?
Yeah, it definitely depends on, I'm only talking specifically dogs and cats, but you do get a whole host of parasites that infect your livestock and other animals as well. So that also needs to be a consideration. But in terms of just dogs and cats, which is where my expertise is more, those types of things, as you could see, it's so variable. So it depends what type of parasites that you're seeing. So a lot of people are very aware of things like ticks. Ticks can transmit things like babesiosis, for example, which can cause severe clinical signs in your pet, that would need some veterinary intervention. But when you look at some of the other things, you could have things like fleas. Fleas could be more subtle. It could be skin conditions, itching, scratching, that type of thing. And intestinal worms, well, it really does depend on what worm is infecting your animal, and then that would depend on the clinical signs and the size of the infestation that your pet is experiencing. So again, it could be quite complex when you look at the different parasites that you get, but as well as the different types of clinical signs that may be displayed because of those parasites that are affecting your pet. So sometimes it could just be mild gastrointestinal upsets that you might see with worms, for example, but sometimes it could be more severe as well if they migrate through the body and that type of thing. So I wish I could give you a more specific answer, but I think it's just because there are so many different types of parasites as well as diseases or symptoms that they can cause that it can range a whole host of different things that you might see in your pets.
Dr. Dent, maybe you can tell us a little bit more about how these parasites spread between our animals and what kind of environments make pets more vulnerable to infestations.
Yeah, another very great question, because I think a lot of people think if my pet is not at risk. So we do see that a lot when we look at or when we have discussions with pet owners, because they're not exposed. They maybe don't go for walks. But I think as South Africans, we do live a very outdoorsy lifestyle, if I can say that. So often our pets are in our gardens, exploring. Just being in your garden and being outdoors could be a risk. There's also other things, interacting with other pets, that could also cause a risk. I see a lot of people are sending their dogs. It's becoming a lot more popular to send them to doggy daycare, for example. So they could be exposed to a whole host of different parasites. So I think the point here is that parasites are in the environment, so it can be very difficult to avoid. Yeah, and it may be also another misconception is that it's only in your maybe rural areas that you'd find parasites, but that is definitely not the case. We're seeing it in urban areas, animals that don't necessarily leave the house and only in gardens. So it definitely is a lot more common than what people think.
Dr. Dent, is there a way that we should be cleaning our homes to make it a safer environment for our animals?
Oh yeah, that's a really good point. So responsible pet ownership is also around, prevention. So part of prevention could also be controlling the environment that you have. So, there are products that can help with, and that we recommend in terms of routine care for parasite prevention. So there's really good products out there that could help be more proactive in terms of preventing parasites, but also in your home. It's a really important consideration. So things like, picking up the feces that are out there on a daily basis is also really, really important. Vaccinations could also be things that are really important just to keep your pets healthy as well. Cleaning your environment as well, because when you look at fleas, for example, have a lot of environmental contamination. So by the time your pet is scratching, there's a lot of fleas in your environment. So cleaning the bedding and that type of thing also is quite important routinely, just keeping your pets healthy. So prevention is key, and definitely that is in your environment as well.
Dr. Dent will be back with you in a second. Dis ons gas op GROOTplaas vanoggend, Dr. Tarryn Dent, besigheidseenheiddirekteur van die Geselskapsdiere by Zoetis oor parasiete in ons diere. Nou eers tyd vir die GROOTplaas kalender. Dit is ingeskakel op GROOTplaas. Ons gas vandag Dr. Tarryn Dent, en sy is die besigheidseenheiddirekteur van Geselskapsdiere by Zoetis. So, Dr. Tarryn, why is early prevention and regular parasite control so important for animal owners?
Yeah, so prevention is definitely key. So by the time that you see clinical signs like such as scratching or illness, the problem is already well established in your pet. So it's much better to rather have a more proactive approach, especially since often parasites go undetected, and rather have a preventative, or like I say again, a proactive approach in terms of parasite prevention. It's much easier to prevent parasites than it would be to control them once you've got a heavy burden in your pet, and that again you can result in you needing some veterinary intervention and treatment at a vet, basically. So prevention would definitely avoid that, especially if your pet is at risk.
Is there some sort of routine that we need to put in place to make sure our animals stay healthy?
Yeah, so what we find is that, in the summer months, people are a lot more aware of of parasites, and that's when we see that the treatment or the prevention of those parasites go up, and the use of certain products that help prevent these types of things. That's when the usage goes up. But we definitely see a dip towards the cooler months, and I think that's also because of a misconception around that it's only a summer problem and there isn't parasites all year round. And we're definitely seeing that parasites are definitely a risk throughout the year. We're seeing higher burdens. Also, it depends on your geography and where you're located, but we definitely are seeing that there are a higher parasite load throughout the year. So consistency is key, depending on your pet's needs, the risk that your pet has, and making sure that you are consistent with your treatment will keep you on top of it and lead to a healthier pet in the end of the day.
Dr. Dent, some parasites also affect humans. How significant is the risk of disease spreading from animals to humans?
It's such a good question, and I'm always quite mindful when I have this conversation around, the infection or the spread to humans, because I don't want people to be nervous around having a pet, because that really isn't the purpose. But I think it is important in terms of just parasite awareness to make people aware that it's not just for your pet's health. There are definitely certain parasites or infections that they can carry that can move or spread, as we like to say, from pets to humans. So it definitely is a consideration, not just for keeping your pet healthy, but responsible pet ownership for your family as well, that you are, looking at those risks and preventing these things accordingly, definitely.
So why should parasite control be a year-round priority and not just something that owners do during a specific month of the year?
Yeah, so as I mentioned a little bit earlier, the parasites that we're seeing, climate change and a couple of other things that impact, and we have actually a high parasite burden in South Africa compared to maybe particularly other markets. So what you will see is that we are seeing parasites throughout the year, and you're definitely not just seeing it in the summer months. So again, depending on your location and your risk of your pets, it is important just to be consistent and to treat throughout the year, and not allow these dips within the cooler months and then infection or your pet to pick up parasites in their environment. So it's year-round, and consistency is really the key.
So, Dr. Dent, just to end off, do you have some practical advice for our viewers when it comes to the health and longevity of their animals?
Yes, absolutely. So we always recommend, I'm a big advocate for preventative care and your annual health checks. So I always recommend with anybody that I interact with that you should be seeing or visiting your veterinarian with your pets at least once a year. The frequency could be higher if you have older pets or pets with diseases or, puppies or kittens or that type of thing. But essentially that annual health check is so important, because at that point you can liaise with your veterinarian and you can discuss your environment, your risk, what lifestyle you lead with your pets, and then they could really guide you in terms of what parasites is your pet at risk for. They could even test at that point for certain parasites like intestinal worms and that type of thing. So that's a great opportunity for that. And then, yes, you can talk around what are the needs of my pet and what should I be doing on an annual basis. So always direct pet owners to the veterinarian for that expert advice, because it really is an individual thing and specific to your pet.
Dr. Dent, thank you so much for your time this morning. We appreciate it. Dis Dr. Tarryn Dent, besigheidseenheiddirekteur van Geselskapsdiere by Zoetis. Dis al wat vir ons tyd het vir GROOTplaas vir vanoggend. Ons hoop jy het lekker saam met ons gekuier en ons sien mekaar weer môre.